This is quite a bit off topic, and it's got nothing really to do with off-grid. But I'm going to talk about some of my uncle's cars. Now, he used to drive vehicles known as Chrysler Valiant. And what it is they're a vehicle that was built in the 1970s before Chrysler was bought out. The last one he had was built in 1980, and it was badged as a Mitsubishi. And Chrysler Australia was obviously struggling at one point there around 1980, and Mitsubishi bought them out. Anyway, these machines are built in the 70s, and it was actually my grandfather had one in his later years, and he died in 1984, and my uncle started driving that, and he liked it and continued to buy those vehicles, except his last two vehicles are Nissan Skylines. Anyway, he used to treat these things pretty rough, as he did with many vehicles, and these were big, heavy old vehicles. They're the sort of ones where if you slam your fingers in the door, it'd probably chop your fingers off. You know, those big, bulky old 1970s machines. Anyway, he used to let them go to absolute rack and ruin, and I mean that was just absolutely buggered. And then, you know, the cop would put it off the road. One of the local cops would go and stick on what we call a canary, which is basically a bright yellow sticker that says defective vehicle, and they stick it on your windscreen so that if you are driving, you've got this bright yellow sticker there. It's about that big, and, you know, they can see if you're driving a defective vehicle because they can see this big yellow sticker in the windscreen. Anyway, one vehicle he had, it was a truck, and he thought, I'll just drive this one last time. And he had that defective vehicle sticker on, and he got a bit of blooming cereal box and cut it out and gaffer taped it to the windscreen over where the sticker was, so he wouldn't get caught. So, you know, it wasn't visible, sort of thing. But anyway, I'll get to some of the stories. There was a time there, I've mentioned this in the videos on eccentric people, where we were trying to fix up brakes, and there were drum brakes in the back of these vehicles, and well, this particular one anyway, and they were metal to metal, but all the springs had all collapsed, and anyway, we're trying to pull all the springs back on and get them all set in place, and we're sitting there, and the I think it's the slave cylinder, the one inside your little cylinder inside your brake there, it was leaking like a sieve. And it was dripping on the ground, and here we were with it jacked up, the tyre off and all that, and it was just dripping on the ground with brake fluid, and I'm just sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, this is a mess. I'm trying to get all these springs up so they don't, hoping they don't sort of flick out, and trying to get it all settled and, you know, straight and put it all back on, and this brake fluid was just dripping on the ground the whole time. And then I looked at the actual drums themselves, and they were metal to metal. And I said to him, you realise these brakes here, this is metal to metal? I said, this is stuff. Oh, well, metal to metal's better than nothing at all. I thought, God blimey. There I was, just put it on and forget about it, and there's brake fluids dripping all over the ground. He had this other one, and up near what Americans call the trunk, but we call the boot, right near the back window, it had rusted out, and I mean, this rust hole, it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and there were a few little rust holes, and he got some fiberglass bog from somewhere, and he just put a little bit of it on there, and then he had this spray can. Instead of spraying it normally, as you do, you know, from a few inches back, he must have sprayed it literally from about an inch away, and he hadn't sanded it back and all that, you know, and made a nice clean job of it, and I said, what's this here? You didn't sand it back, you just sort of whacked the bog straight on. I said, you're supposed to sand it back and that, because I've done half of a spray painting and sandblasting apprenticeship, so, you know, I know that, you know, you're supposed to sand these things back and all that, and I've, you know, seen my father do a bit of body work on cars. I said, how come you just sort of slapped it on like that? I said, it's supposed to be sanded back and that. Oh, well, that looks to the cops like I'm actually doing something. So if they complain, I got an excuse to say, well, at least I'm trying to fix a car because I've got a bit of boggy. And I was thinking, oh, that's just pathetic, though. And this hole, I'm not joking, it was big enough I could put my entire hand in through this hole in the body. I mean, it was that bad. This was a rust hole. Another time he had what's his name? A really bad radiator. And I mean, this was leaking something chronic. And he had to drive in a town. It was like 17 or 18 miles from where we live into this town that he was driving into. And he had to fill up with about 5.5 gallons before he left in the morning. And then he'd get in there and he'd use another 2.5, 3 gallons, probably about 3 gallons, while he was in the town. And then he'd go visit this old relative, and he'd be there for hours at this old auntie's place. And he ended up, when he was there, he had to put in, it's like 8 gallons, something like that, before he'd drive back home. This is how bad the radiators were. He'd go to Wreckers and he'd get another one, and then it'd be leaking as well. But oh well, you know, it's just the way it is. And you may say, why don't you, why couldn't you solder it back up with a blowtorch? Well, I'll answer that question. Haven't been in the heat transfer industry. Apparently, old radiators, if you do that, you start opening up leaks all along them. It's just the way it's, lead that's been there, solder that's been there for a while, it sort of can go a bit funny. But basically, if you start fixing a leak in this end, the heat will, cause a bit of thermal expansion and whatnot. But basically, just the way it is, it'll start leaking in other parts of the radiator. But yeah, that was a shocky one he had. But I remember this day. So you got to understand something with these propane vehicles, or LPG vehicles as we call them here. He was actually the one who converted me and my father onto, you want to get a gas vehicle, and he used to always be rattling on about it. And in the end, we got one, and it was brilliant. We've never looked back. But what it is, if you know anything about decompression of certain sorts of gases, particularly, isobutane is R600A, which we can have here and they can have in Europe, but you can't have in the United States because of concerns about flammability. But all the same, they have R22, which is, refrigerant gas 22. And that is, you go and look up what it is. I think it's just straight butane from memory. I can't exactly remember. But, that's also a normal flammable gas. Butane is cigarette lighter gas. And, when these things get decompressed, they get very cold. Well, with your normal stoves and that, it works a bit differently with this, because it actually comes up still as a compressed liquid from the back of the vehicle to the front. And it decompresses inside what we call the converter. And Wikipedia will tell you nobody calls them converters. They're called on-demand regulators. And basically, that's what they are, on-demand regulators, and there's a little Venturi setup that you got to have as well. But basically, because they get so cold, they freeze over. The nozzles, the jets in them freeze over. So they run 1-inch heater pipe into them to keep them from freezing. Anyway, when your water gets down in your radiator a little bit too much, that doesn't happen. And here we were one time going to the university, and I used to go there with him to the library. The library is a double story at this place. I mean, she's absolutely huge. There's probably a few acres of library if you measure out the floor space. Anyway, he used to go there to read all his legal stuff. And I'd disappear and start reading the engineering books on plastics and a few other different sort of things like that. But basically, we're driving there one day, and the car just died. And what the hell is going on here? And I thought, oh, damn it. And we were only like about a mile off this place, and I thought, oh, gosh. So, what the hell's wrong with this bloody thing? And lifts the hood up and that, and then couldn't work it out. And he goes, oh, yeah, I know what it is. See, look at that. And it's frozen up. Like, oh my gosh, because I'd never seen it. What happens is they get ice on them, like when a fridge, when you defrost a fridge, it's not that bad, but it's that sort of stuff that builds up in your fridge that you later need to defrost. And it's like a thin layer. Oh, it's only very thin. It's like a 1/16 of an inch all over the converter box. And it was the first time I'd seen it, and it was quite surprising, and I've seen it quite a number of times since. But yeah, what it was the radiator water was too low. So then he filled it all up with water, and he said, oh, I've got to let it defrost for about 20 minutes. So then started her up again, and we drove up to this place, and we'd only gone like, you know, a mile, and he hadn't given it enough time to defrost. So basically, because he'd refilled the radiator with so much cold water so recently, the engine block hadn't had enough chance to warm it up, and the damn thing refroze a second time. And here we were, got into the place, and we're driving in, and we're almost into the car park, and she died again. And he's just sitting there like this, and here we are, come on you bastard, don't stop. And he's got it in neutral, and we're just rolling along, and we went round a roundabout and kept rolling along the flat, and then where the car park was, it goes down on a bit of an angle, and as we're going on the angle, good, okay, she'll roll in. And then he just rolled into a space, boom, and stopped. I said, bloody hell, lucky we made it. And he said, oh yeah, you know, that's been happening every second day for, you know, the last few weeks. And I was sitting there thinking, oh gosh. But, you know, these vehicles were absolutely stuffed. He'd also have this trick where, and you can do this with carburetor vehicles, you turn the key off as you're driving. And he used to do this just as he's going past his mate's place, just to tell him he was going past or make him look out the window or whatever. And he'd be driving along and he'd be going full on 60 miles an hour, and he'd just turn the key off. And he'd wait like 15 seconds, and then he'd just turn it straight back on again. Not right to the start, but back on, just, you know, before you get the spring-loaded start bit. And of course the ignition will start and she'd backfire right up through the exhaust. Anyway, you do that about 3 times and that's it. Your exhaust is about stuffed. And he done it once to another old Holden he had, and the muffler, he said, it blew up like a football. And basically he would blow these exhausts off. He'd blow them up, like the muffler would just explode inside. And he'd always be driving a car that, you know, be blah, 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 like this, and you think it's a V8, and everybody asks him, oh, is that a V8? No, it's just a 6-cylinder, and the mufflers are just destroyed in it. Anyway, sometimes he'd do that, and he'd literally blow the muffler off, like he'd blow the whole pipe off, and the whole pipe would just end up, you know, wearing out at one point or another, or just rust through or something like that, and he'd re-hook it up back up, but he'd hook it back up with fencing wire. Anyway, he'd be going down these corrugated roads and it'd fall off again, so then he'd just pull up on the side of the road, so he'd throw it in the boot or the trunk and drive back, or pull off the side of the road, and if it wasn't too hot, he'd rewire the thing back on and keep going again, but they'd keep falling off all the damn time. And there'd be times there where, because he'd never change his plugs or anything like that, and his oil, he'd never change that. He'd basically never change his oil. When you get the vehicle, it should have had an oil change already, like it was black as, and then he'd drive it another 1.5 years or so, and then the engine would die from, you know, not having the oil changed in it, and the filter would be completely blocked up and everything like that, and it'd just burn the engine out. But, you know, he'd never change the plugs either, so they'd come up with all this crap and carbon and stuff, and he'd go to start it, and it wouldn't want to start too well, so he'd boom, 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 boom. And I remember one time he was, when we first come back here in '94, we were living in a rented property, and it was right literally next door to a pub, and he was there in the pub car park, and started her up, and she boom, 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 and he's trying to get it to run smooth and fire on all cylinders. Anyway, he's doing this with a flaming muffler blowing out, and a couple of blokes open the pub door, and they're looking at it like, what the hell's going on out here, sort of thing. But another time, he just said he's really strange. He'd take things apart, and he'd never put them back together. And he had the dashboard, and the dashboard had like these 5 of these monster big Phillips head screws in it, holding the dashboard in. Anyway, he took the dashboard off to do a bit of electrical work because his switch on for his headlights had stuffed up. It was arcing out or some crap. Anyway, he took these 5 screws out, and then he went and put one single screw in the middle back in, and then just kept the other 5 screws in the centre console in the glove box or something, or just set them somewhere in a little shopping bag or whatever. And I was saying, what's the point, you know? Oh, well, you know, I think she'll be all right. It only really needs this one screw. Yeah, ha ha. He came up to the corner of one of the roads near us, turned the corner, and he's got this one single screw right in the middle that he's put in. And I don't even think he's tightened it properly either, because he never used to tighten anything up properly. He's terrible with that. And he always used to do it just a little bit of tension, and he'd leave it and it'd be loose. And I don't want to over-tighten it. Yeah, but it's just going to fall out. You know, if you don't tighten it, probably just rattle away. Anyway, he had this one single screw. He comes up to the corner of this road, turns the corner, and the whole bloody dashboard fell off and landed in his lap. Oh, God blow me. Oh, freaking thing. Went around the corner, the whole dashboard fell in his lap, and I felt like saying, well, you dickhead, if you had to put all the damn screws back in, maybe that's why they got 5 screws in it when they built it, to hold the dashboard in, and it doesn't work with just one screw. And of course, he damn near strip out the single screw that was in there, you know, as a result. But, blimmin', some of these vehicles, he had the, when it all stuffed up, he went and got another switch, but I don't know if he put it in. Anyway, he ended up taking out the switch out of where it was in the dash, and he just had it dangling down near his leg. He's driving along with his blooming great heap of wires on all the lights just dangling away near his leg. And, oh gosh, like, you always try and reuse the same things. And we were there once and he had a block fuel filter, and I mean, it was just chocked up, and it was a little plastic thing. You know, $3 to buy them. They're not worth a cracker. And here he was trying to blow it out with an air compressor. And my old man's going, hang on, I think you're blowing it the wrong way. You're forcing the stuff further into the blasted filter. Oh, yeah, but it's nice to reuse these things if you can. My dad's going, what's the bloody point? It's $3, you know? Just go buy another one. And that was the first time that, you know, my father actually convinced him to go and buy a consumable device, like a filter, on one of his vehicles, and he went and paid his $3 or $3.50 and got another fuel filter. And, you know, he just keep trying to use things that are like they're disposable. You're supposed to just chuck it out and get another one, you know? And yeah, you know, it was just ridiculous sometimes there, but he, what's the other one he had that time? I'll just pause it for a second and come back while I think of this other one. Yeah, it was right. The tyres. This is a funny day, this one. He had these tyres he used to get for, I think it was $15 each or something like that. And they're basically about stuffed. And you go to these tyre places and you get these tyres, and you know, you say, oh, can I look through your stack and that and get you ones that are all right? And they'd often, if they seen any, you know, they sort of, well, I assume they probably didn't put them aside for him, but I assume they almost might have been because they got to know he'd be coming in. But they had ones that were sort of a little bit beefier. They weren't completely burnt out, but they sort of had a little bit of meat still left on them. A little bit of rubber still on them, rather. So he'd buy those for $15 each. And I remember I got a puncture in a tyre that was basically new. And it was a stick went through it. And I got it plugged up, and it cost me $25. And he's going, oh, there's no bloody point. You might as well just bought a $15 one if you're going to use it for a spare. And I said, well, the thing's completely blooming, you know, full of rubber. And I said, I'm not just going to throw it out. You know, I'm going to patch it up because it's got a lot of life left in it. But that was what I ended up designating, you know, as my spare after I put a hole in it. And I just kept driving with the actual spare that I put on it when I initially changed it over. Anyway, he used to have these tyres and he used to wear them right out. I mean, he'd wear them right out. Literally the fabric or the steel, you could see that coming through before he'd say, oh, that's it, it's, you know, worn out. And one day, he used to be harping on, he wanted us to buy an air compressor. And my dad said, what do I need a damn air compressor for? He said, I got nothing to, you know, use it before. I'm not going to spend a couple of $100 even on, you know, going and, I mean, there weren't that many Chinese products available at the time, but the old man's going, I don't want to spend hundreds of dollars on an air compressor because I'm not going to use the damn thing, so what's the point? And then my uncle was talking to me, trying to get me to buy one. And he said, oh, well, you know, the other day I had 3 tyres blow and go flat on me in one day. I had to change 3 tyres in one day. So that's why you need an air compressor. Now, you know, how come you can't say that ain't going to happen to you? And I said, well, it doesn't happen to me because I don't drive around with shit tyres on my car. Like then he was pissed off because I said it, but it was true. He's driving around, he goes, oh, how do you reckon about this tyre? If blasted steel inside it, you can see on the damn outside of the thing. And you just be thinking, God blimey, no wonder the cops target you and, oh, it's unfair harassment, I'm going to write to the police commissioner. And you'd be going, get real. Like the police commissioner just look at you and go, yep, here's a nutcase, and chuck the letter in the bin, you know. Just flaming stupid. But him and his vehicles are, yeah, absolute classics, really, some of them. It's, I'll give you an idea of what it was like. He had one of them put on gas, or that's what we call it, but, you know, LPG, propane. So he got this one put on gas, as we call it. And anyways, he went in there and took me in the Skyline, and this is the last vehicle he had, the last Valiant he had, rather. And I was in there with the Skyline wagon, and he said, you drive the Skyline home, and I'll drive the Valiant home. Anyway, he hopped in it after, weeks and weeks of driving the Skyline, and he said, I'll meet you. He said, just stay behind me initially, just to make sure that, you know, she's all going to run fine and we're not going to have any issues, you know, it's going to break down because, you know, in case I need you to give me a hand, and I had, you know, a cell phone with me and that, you know, in case we need to ring my father for tools or whatever. And I think I might have had a few spanners in the Skyline, actually. But, you know, we didn't know if there was going to be any airlocks in the system or whatever because it had just been installed. And anyway, here we were, just drove it up to the end of the street, and they had a service station there, you know, fuel station. And so he was going to fill it up with LPG. And he done that, and I sort of, you know, hopped out and, yeah, all running right and all that. And he said, yeah, seems to be running right initially, but he said, bloody hell, I got out on the road down, it was like trying to drive a freaking train, he said. And, you know, he said, I think he said it was like a truck or something like that. He said it's as heavy as a bloody train. And, you know, and that's the sort of vehicle it is. These, you know, things are as heavy as, and he said, I'm used to power steering, and then I hop into this and it's got no power steering. He said, bloody hell, it's like a blooming freight train. And he said, yeah, I'll you know, fill up with LPG, and he said, yeah, I should be right now, you can head off. And so then we, you know, drove back. There's another time, yeah. He had his backhoe at another person's place, and I'll tell you what, he wasn't very good with digging dams, but there were plenty of people who he dug stuff for. And this bloke he moved around a whole heap of rocks for. The sods wouldn't pay him. It happened that many times. Oh, well, I need this amount of money. And he'd expect to work for slave wages. You know, he didn't really actually want much hourly pay. And these sods wouldn't even give him the money to cover the diesel. And this happened to quite a few people that he worked for with this thing, and basically just gave up because he said, I'm losing money. Here I am spending money that I don't have. You know, they can't really afford, so to speak, because he was only on a, you know, welfare payment, and because he was an invalid pensioner because of all his health problems. And here I am, you know, blowing all this money on diesel, and they can't even pay me the diesel cost. Anyway, we were getting it back from, he had to borrow money off my father to get enough diesel in it to get it back to his own property. And so that time I was driving one of these Valiants back, and the seat was all sagging in, and as I was driving this thing, I was, what was it, about 20 might have been 22, something like that. And here he had all this stuff on the dashboard, and I'm driving along, and the blooming thing's, you know, steering wheel's up like this, and up above the dashboard, and the seat, I was sunk right down in this seat. I could barely even see over the dashboard. And here I was, about 22 years old, battling to see over the dashboard of this big thing. And he didn't have much stuff on the dash either. He only had like about 2 inches of stuff on the dash. I was battling to see out the windscreen, you know. But he used to fill them right up with stuff. Man, he'd overload the hell out of them. And then he'd be, you know, running along with these tyres that were basically completely had it. But he'd overfill them to the point that it was bottoming out. And I mean, the leaf springs in it were completely flattened out, and then they'd hit the rubber on the axle would be hitting the protective rubbers that were on the chassis when you do overload it. And that would happen all the time, but particularly going up his driveway, which is full of holes, as you could well imagine, him being him. And yeah, you know, so boom, boom, oh, she's been bottoming out. Another time we were there, and he never used to tighten anything, like I was saying. And anyway, he went to a mechanic, and this mechanic was having a look at it, probably in a lot of disgust. And he touched the back wheel. He changed over this back wheel. But typical him, he hadn't tightened it up properly. And as he had it up, he got it up on the jacks, like the big one that, you know, you mount on the, you got the 4 bits of slip under, and you hit the button, and it lifts it right up, and the whole vehicle is right above you. So we all walked underneath, and it was a mechanic and me and him walking underneath, and he touched this back wheel, and the bloody thing was shaking side to side because he hadn't tightened it up. And I mean, literally, he said, "Oh, I've been hearing a bit of clonking as I've been driving along," and it was the flaming wheel rattling back and forwards on the wheel studs because he hadn't put the nuts on tight enough. And then what had happened is it destroyed all the blooming thread on the wheel studs. You know, I better tighten it up. So he tightened it up a bit better. There's another place he used to go and visit one of his friends who was an engineer. He was actually an aeronautical engineer, and you go in there, and he had all the draftsman stuff, all the big boards out, and he'd have all these big blooming blueprints out, and that was interesting sort of stuff. But he used to go and drive in there, and he was worried about the handbrake and all that. So he used to sort of reverse it in, and he'd do a real hard left-hand turn in to sort of jar the back wheel up against the gutter because he wasn't too, you know, he didn't really trust the handbrake and all that. So he'd be there trying to wedge this back wheel against the gutter, almost like as though it was a chock, like a wheel chock. But all these vehicles, like, you had to see him to believe him, you know. And of course, he was a hoarder, and he used to have stuff in the back seat, and it was literally stacked up to basically the top of the seat, not the top of the headrest, but just the top of the seat itself. And you know, that's how he'd have stuff all packed in there. He had this Aboriginal girl once who is just a girl he knew, and one of the very few actual Aboriginals that are actually black and darker than me in this state, and in this area rather. Anyway, she wanted a lift. Anyway, had all this junk in the front seat, and there she was sitting there up like this. "Oh, I'll be right, I'll sit on the front seat." And there's one thing about Aboriginal women, they wouldn't be worried about living off grid. They, you know, it's just the Aboriginal way in general. They can easily have low living standards, and they don't worry about it. But here she was, "Oh, it'll be right, don't worry," and even, you know, he was worried, and for him to be worried is you know, surprising. And she was sitting on about, oh, what was it? Like about 1.5 foot of junk on the front seat, and then she was so close to the roof that she had to lean her head back, and she's sitting there with her head back like this, and you know, almost kissing the blasted roof of the car. And she's going, "Oh, it's all right. Well, you know, you give me a lift down to this place about half a mile away." And he's going, "No, I've got to clear some junk out. You know, if we have an accident or something, you damn break your neck." You know, well, this is, you know, the junk he used to keep in the front seat. But you know, I'm not too good with that either, because I am usually the only person driving this car, sort of thing. So, or the only person in this car, rather. So yeah, but my gosh, you know, the trials and tribulations of my uncle and his cars.